Hey everybody, Chris here, back with you talking about longevity practices and the fundamental trade-off between longevity and growth mode in our bodies. And I'm curious, what does aging mean to you? So often as a body worker, as a dancer, as an athlete, I hear the people around me talk about their mobility or lack thereof, and how that or their memory loss or decline is just an indicator of aging. And I'm curious what it means to you, because aging is really a pattern of how the body naturally breaks itself down and builds itself back up. It's a process that the body does normally, regularly throughout our lives as part of the natural regeneration and rejuvenation of our body's tissues and systems in order for us to live a long life. And in order to live a long life, we have to balance. We kind of have to master the balance between growth and longevity mode. In growth mode, that takes a lot of energy. And the faster an organism grows, then the earlier the organism dies, right? Like the lifespan, depending on the organism, of course, really kind of indicates what kind of energy demands are going to need to be met in order for that organism to grow enough to reproduce, which is, nature's goal is that passing on of genetic information. And so there are a lot of theories around aging, and I want to talk about a couple of them with you now. One of them is referred to as the disposable Soma theory. Now, I first learned of this through a book called, where is it? The Longevity Solution. This is a great book, pretty recently published too, like 2019, around some of the science that we have with longevity practices here in the West that come from other cultures too. But the book talks about intermittent fasting and some of the flavonoids that we get from tea and coffee and red wine and some of the other practices around longevity. And this is where I first learned of this disposable Soma theory of aging, which is that energy is required to reproduce, right? In fact, it's the priority of Mother Nature. And anything that is any energy that's left over after reproduction is considered disposable. So according to this theory, organisms are going to continue that growth phase as quick as possible, as strong as possible, so that you can get to maturation stage, reproduce, and produce as many offspring as possible, and then die, right? That's this particular theory. Now, obviously, it's got some holes in it, and not really the theory of aging that is accepted by mainstream now. Another one you probably have heard of, that I certainly heard of growing up long before it became a wellness pro, was a free radical theory. And free radicals are these, accumulation of damage from natural biological processes in the body. And those processes make these free radicals and create this oxidative stress on the body's tissues. And we fight them with antioxidants, and but the research out there is pretty contradictory from what I understand. And if you have other data, please, I want to know. But with the free radical theory, there's a bit of conflicting information around these antioxidant supplements that we take. In fact, it was vitamin C and E that had shown it actually increased aging, or if you will. It did not do the inverse as the free radical theory would suggest. So there's some conflicting information, and that's probably why it is not mainstream. Although I do remember, I feel like it was mainstream at some point in probably like the early 90s, late 80s. I feel like that was kind of the conversation around longevity and in aging and how we fight aging, was all this free radical stuff, which is still true. I mean, it's not untrue. A more recent theory around aging, where study is preliminary but ongoing, is a mitochondrial theory. And we're seeing this especially with people who have chronic fatigue and adrenal fatigue. And we know that from basic science, the mitochondria are the powerhouses of the cell, that they're responsible for producing energy in the cell. And when we have what the yogis refer to as ama, this undigested residue, this unprocessed substance in our physical body, and even emotionally, there is this substance of the undigested experiences in our lives. This ama, this residue, is what clings to cells and within cells and in between cells, and leads to this mitochondrial dysfunction, where there is a suffocation, if you will, of the more subtle channels of communication between cells and between the body's systems. And as such, the mitochondria just aren't that strong, and they'll fold on themselves, much like with intermittent fasting. You reach, after a certain amount of hours, you're going to reach this phase of autophagy, where cells start to kill off those that are underperforming. Right? This is part of the body's natural junk and renew cycle that I mentioned earlier. And mitochondria have the same process. So, there's mitophagy, as it's referred to. And with this theory, the mitochondria are very tired, and they fold in on themselves. They actually collapse and kind of commit suicide, if you will. Now, where some of the research is still ongoing is where we know mitochondria has its own DNA. And so if over an extended period of time, like decades or years in our lives with these habits, this is the patterning of undigested toxins suffocating cells, killing mitochondria, then over time, the mitochondria's DNA is going to be altered. This is kind of genetic law. And so future generations, the new mitochondria that is produced, have a lesser quality of genetic expression. So this is where the mitochondria theory of aging still requires that ongoing research. But I think that's a little bit closer to what I'm seeing in my 20 plus year practice of helping people maintain their vitality and extend their longevity with these habits of the yogis and circadian living. Another more modern theory to aging, and this one I'm definitely down with like 100%, is referred to as Hormesis or Hormesis. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. It's Hormesis. I know it more as positive stressors. This is when we are intentionally and purposefully taxing or testing our nervous system with very small doses of the toxin that would, in another dosage, be considered harmful or non-beneficial. Consider it kind of like a microdosing, if you will, or a training of the nervous system, which is kind of how I learned it, as referred to as positive stressors. Those are my cold therapy experimentation. You've probably seen me share a little bit on Facebook about my first cryotherapy session, and using cold showers as one of these positive stressors and approaches to training my nervous system to be able to handle small doses of stress that over time are going to allow for and build for this resilience, so that when the next pandemic or the next COVID or the next crisis happens, I'm not so easily knocked off base. Or if I fall off my paddleboard here in Colorado and I fall into these really icy glacial waters, that my nervous system is going to be better equipped to get myself out of that situation because I've done my cold therapies, right? You probably heard of Wim Hof, this breathing technique that is from this Swedish gentleman. I'm embarrassed to say, I can't remember his name at the moment. And is it William Hof? I don't know. Anyway, Iceman, as he's referred to, right? Breaking all these Guinness World Records for hiking Mount Everest in like his shorts and doing all of these really extreme Hormesis practices of training his body to be able to handle intense cold temperatures. And so these low doses of stressors, instead of weakening the organism, it's going to make it stronger and more resilient to stress. And remember this, a great example is the Princess Bride movie. I don't know how many of you, I'm probably dating myself, but the Princess Bride, where one of the protagonists, Wesley, right, he starts to take these small increments of this poison on a daily basis, fearing that when he returns to this village, that it's very likely someone will try to poison him. And so he takes these small dosages, and then later in the story, he is able to spike these two drinks, these 2 cups of wine between him and his villain. I don't remember the character's name in the movie. If any of you do, put a comment below. But, he was able to walk away from that, right? He was able to survive that because he had, in essence, trained his body and nervous system to tolerate the poison. And I really feel like this is a pretty big factor in our capacity to build that resilience and age more skillfully. I've been applying this myself, not only with cold therapy, but in my personal yoga practice with my breath retention during pranayama routines. I'll hold the breath for a lot longer and really try stretching out those retentions and feeling what that's like on the nervous system, training my brain that all is well, even when there's stress and a situation that, needs tending to. I'm curious, how do you handle stress and how do you train your nervous system? Are there particular habits that you use or hacks that you've come across or read about or theories that you want to challenge? I want to hear about it. Let me know your thoughts, and let's connect again soon. Bye.